This is Southern Cross Nightly News. First at 6 with Lisa Whitehead.
Tonight, civil disorder erupts in PNG, a state funeral for a former premier, and cyclists come to grief at the Nationals. Good evening. Another day of violence and civil unrest in Port Moresby. The heart of the city came to a virtual standstill when police set up barricades to prevent the spread of rioting. Meanwhile, a student forum at the University of Papua New Guinea blamed the Australian media for stirring up the unrest.
For the second day running, mayhem on the streets of Port Moresby. What started as a protest against government plans to use foreign mercenaries on Bougainville degenerated into more looting and rioting. Police were hopelessly outnumbered and defied by protesters. 5,000 demonstrators gathered outside the Army barracks, where sacked Army Chief Brigadier General Singaroff is still biding his time. He was sacked for opposing government plans to use freelance soldiers in Bougainville and demanding the Prime Minister's resignation. The riot squad fired live rounds into the air. The pungent smell of tear gas hung in the air. At one stage, police had to pull back amid a hail of rocks, cans and bottles. After what seemed an eternity, a few soldiers arrived to help out and seemed to command more respect than the police loyal to Sir Julius Chan's government. This is an indication of the kind of trouble we have here in Port Moresby at the moment. One of the looters trying to get into this store here in the centre of the city has had his hand cut off trying to get in. A security guard used a knife to chop his hand off. Top Australian diplomat Philip Flood, who arrived last night to help negotiate an end to the crisis, remains tight-lipped.
Expatriates working in Papua New Guinea want Australian troops sent in to protect them, as a new travel advisory warns any visitors to exercise extreme care for their personal safety. But the Prime Minister today ruled out the need to begin evacuations.
The Foreign Affairs Department, in its updated travel advice, says the PNG capital is responsible for more than half the crimes committed in the country, including murders, robberies and rape, and warns Australians to use extreme care. Expatriates working in Port Moresby need no convincing after 2 days of rioting.
Well, everyone's very worried, actually. The fact that it's continued on today in a bigger way is a bit of a worry.
Our High Commission is monitoring the security situation very closely. We naturally have an eye to the physical well-being of Australians in Papua New Guinea.
The Australian government's in Australia, and their people here are locked up under chain and key at the embassies. Our blokes are on the road working.
The expatriate who works for a big Australian firm says there's little confidence in the PNG police and military and believes it's time to send in Australian troops to protect them.
There is no evidence, I repeat, to date to suggest that there's any danger to Australians, but we'll keep that situation under very close attention.
Australia does have an evacuation plan which, like the Italian, German and American action in Albania last weekend, involves armed troops providing cover for fleeing nationals. But with 10,000 Australians providing essential commercial infrastructure in PNG, Canberra would be extremely reluctant to go down that path. Australia's high-level diplomatic efforts commit Canberra to greater assistance to PNG to end the civil war on Bougainville. But Prime Minister Howard doesn't see the deploying of Australian troops on the island as an answer.
Former Labor Premier Harold Norman Holgate, better known as Harry, was today honoured with a state funeral in Launceston. A legend in both political and tourism circles, his death was described as a great loss for Launceston, Tasmania and the nation.
Harry Holgate told family and friends he did not want a sombre affair. He wanted his life celebrated. Friends say today's proceedings would have met with his approval.
And looking at some of the people I've just seen come in, I think he would be, extremely pleased. He'd be up there chuffed.
Over 600 people attended the service. The eulogies were given by Bruce Baird, Australian Tourism Council, Opposition Leader Michael Field and Premier Tony Rundle, who spoke of Mr Holgate's premature death.
He handled the devastating news of his illness with a courage, honesty and openness that I think showed the true mark of the man.
All three eulogies spoke of a man with a great sense of humour, enormous energy and incredible inner strength. And no matter what side of the political fence, Harry Holgate was loved and respected by all.
The tributes paid in the House of Parliament this week took the longest of any tribute to be made in the history of the Parliament. I think that speaks volumes for the man and for what he stood for.
The Holgate family left the service to attend a private burial. Guests remain to remember a man many say left the world a better place than he found it.
State premiers arrived in Canberra this afternoon for their annual financial stoush with the federal government. The premiers are also considering the wicked land rights problem, which is now threatening to break up the federal coalition government.
Flying into the national capital on the state plane, Queensland leader Rob Borbidge was prepared to end the coalition between the Liberals and the Nationals over Aboriginal land rights.
There's a very real danger that the National Party, for reasons of political survival, may be faced with some very tough options.
Some National MPs have already threatened to resign.
But the situation for the National Party will be very grave indeed.
The Prime Minister is trying to reassure his rural partners.
Let me say to the farmers of Australia, I won't let you down.
But the Nationals fear Mr Howard will not go as far as extinguishing native title on pastoral leases. As a compromise, farmers say both black and white land rights could then be drawn up in a new law.
We are quite prepared to look at the concept of codification of both sets of rights.
The Prime Minister is this evening telling the Premiers what his WIC solution is, but that's unlikely to please all the states just when they've got a bigger fight on their hands over money.
The Commonwealth offer leaves open the possibility of reductions in special purpose grants in the next budget. We think health and housing is especially vulnerable.
That could spell cuts to services or state tax increases. The Treasurer refused to say if the tied state grants would be cut, but at least the bulk of the state's money, the general grants, seem guaranteed.
I don't welsh on deals made with the Australian public, and I don't welsh on deals made with premiers.
The states are happy with that.
What's on the table at the moment would seem to be fair and reasonable.
But the real cuts, possibly around 3%, may not be revealed until the federal budget in May.
Claims today Australia's agricultural industry is not as clean and green as we think. Chemical use on farms is again under the spotlight at a two-day conference at Ulverston.
Clean, green agriculture, is it fact or fiction? It's an argument unlikely to be settled at the meeting of agriculturalists to discuss that very issue.
There's a little bit of a beat up about clean green. It's very much a marketing thing.
I don't think Australia has a lot to worry about. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't stop trying and continue to improve, but we are considered to be very green and very clean.
Yet it's claimed the clean green concept fails to provide the public with a measurable standard of quality and safety. Those against the use of agricultural chemicals believe the controls aren't strict enough.
We've been overdoing pesticide use for years, and it's high time we got a pesticide reduction policy in place with practical assistance to the farming sector.
However, it's argued Australia's safety standards are at the forefront of international farming practices and that there will always be a place for pesticides for conventional farming.
If you want your food and your fibre produced at a quality level, at a very reasonable price, then you're going to have conventional production.
But pressure continues to mount to cut the use of pesticides.
We really, really do need to reduce pesticide use a lot, not just a little.
Ahead in Southern Cross Nightly News, the Albanian refugee crisis and the bike squad goes better with Coke. Two young British tourists remain in a serious condition in the Royal Hobart Hospital following yesterday's crash on the Tasman Highway near Triabunna, which left their 29-year-old companion dead. The three women were travelling in a station wagon which collided with a panel van just north of Triabunna. The driver of the panel van suffered minor injuries and was discharged from the Royal Hobart Hospital last night. Police are appealing to anyone who saw either of the vehicles on the highway just before 3 p.m. to contact the Accident Investigation Squad in Hobart. Tasmania Police have announced a naming sponsor for its bike squad. With their machines now sporting new corporate logos alongside the police badge, the safety of the streets is now being helped along with money from a soft drink company.
The Bicycle Police Squad has been operating in Tasmania since 1993. What's new is the form of funding. From today, the Hobart City Squad is on the streets, courtesy of the Coca-Cola Company, a sole sponsor. Superintendent Ken O'Geary accepted a $7,000 cheque, which has funded new bikes and uniforms.
They've given us quite a considerable sum of money and enabled us to purchase very good machines, and the amount given also is going to allow us to maintain those machines and equipment for the next 2 years.
In return, Coke gets joint billing with a police logo on the bike and a sense of community involvement.
A presence in the community that Coke is involved with the community and with the police to provide a safer city area where obviously many of the people are our direct customers and nearly everybody is a consumer, so obviously there's that importance there.
Ken O'Geary has no misgivings over accepting corporate funding, say it's the way police services are going across the country. That's not an opinion shared by Shadow Police Minister David Llewellyn.
I don't think it's appropriate for a police force to be beholding to a private organisation for sponsorship. The government should adequately fund the police in order to do their job.
Meantime, the latest road safety message for Tasmania has taken to the buses. It's the theme Don't Push It, a campaign aimed at making school bus travel safer for children. In the wake of campaigns against speeding and drink driving, Tasmania's Road Safety Task Force is now targeting driving habits around school bus stops.
Almost a third of Australians suffer from arthritis, and not all of those are elderly. It costs the nation $4.5 billion a year. So the Arthritis Foundation is out to cut those costs and increase public awareness of the disease during National Arthritis Week.
17-year-old Fay Loon was shocked to discover 3 years ago she suffers from rheumatoid arthritis. Like most, she thought the debilitating disease only affected the elderly. In fact, nearly 60% of arthritis sufferers are under 65.
I tore my cartilage playing hockey, and then it just sort of, the pain didn't go away, and yeah, just found out that I had arthritis.
1 in 1,000 children are crippled by the incurable disease, and the cause is unknown.
It makes you a lot tired, just like the pain, just sitting down for long periods of time, just hard to concentrate when you're in a lot of pain. Takes away all your sort of concentration levels, just go down, yeah.
As most forms of the disease are cured by poorly managed sporting injuries, Arthritis Foundation members are out to increase public awareness and spread the word that something can be done to help. National Arthritis Week is from April 6 to 12.
Overseas now, and Italy has declared a state of emergency after being overwhelmed by refugees from nearby Albania. More boat people arrived today in the Italian port city of Brindisi. They're fleeing a country rocked by unrest since the collapse of a shoddy investment scheme. The emergency declaration frees up millions in government help for the displaced people, but they won't be allowed to stay for long. Within 3 months, they'll be sent back to Albania, Europe's poorest country. A lack of promised government funds may soon force the closure of courses at a national performing arts college. The Australian College of Entertainment says its funding crisis may have students without a place to study by Easter.
18-year-old Sydney dancer Sarah Vassallo is a product of the Australian College of Entertainment. Sarah's training for a career in show business. She and her fellow students are in Los Angeles performing at the invitation of American dancers. But it's whether they'll have a college to return to that's frustrating the school's principals. Come Easter, the school studio will be demolished, and the non-profit college doesn't have the funds to build a new one.
Here's these kids over in America, and they come back and they don't know, that's they as Robin and Glenn, don't know whether they can keep the college going.
The college's financial future looked bright under the Keating government, but their promises of help vanished with a loss at the ballot box. And current funding talks with state and federal governments are yet to bear fruit.
You hit walls, but, you know, the whole element that we have, this is not the first thing that we've hit. It's the most major, obviously. And you do have to go through things like this. But no, I'm ploughing on no matter what.
Much of the frustration has centred on the failure of any one portfolio to claim responsibility for the school. Neither the federal arts or education ministers are considering funding. So without state support, corporate sponsorship may be the only answer.
There are shocking results from a report into breakfast cereals and which ones nutritionists recommend for our children. Only 4 out of 300 passed the test.
Nutritionists always remind us that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, especially for children. But now they're telling us there are only a few cereals that are worth eating. A report into the nutritional value of cereal products recommends only 4 out of 300. Those favoured by nutritionists are Weet-Bix, Mini-Wheats, Vitabrits and Wheaties.
There are some that are much healthier than others, and in particular some of the cereals that have been put on the market and targeted particularly at children should be treated as treats.
Over 100 nutritionists responded to the survey commissioned by Sanitarium. They argue that most cereals contain too much fat, sugar and salt and not enough fibre. They also criticise labels for being meaningless. While consumers are told the amount of nutrients per 100 grams, there's no advice on what amount is desirable. And changing packaging may not be the answer.
I think as nutritionists we can work closely with the food industry to encourage them to make many more foods available on the market that fit into the categories that we know are much healthier.
And it seems breakfast eaters don't agree with the experts on what is best. Only Weet-Bix and Vitabrits are among the 5 top-selling cereals in Australia.
In finance news tonight, the Australian dollar is buying 78.72 US cents. The All Ordinaries closed just over 6 points higher. The day in sport now with Stephen Titmus and a huge boost for harness racing.
Yes, Lisa, the best are coming to Tassie over Easter. Also tonight, a new look Northwest basketball team and a nasty night at the Silverdome.
Officials, supporters and ambulance crews dashed to aid the fallen. Among those hospitalised, veteran Tasmanian official Jessie Gilmore and South Australian star Rachel Linky.
I was going to go down. A girl fell from the top of the track right in front of me, so I knew I was going over her.
She'll be back in the saddle tonight, but the champ admits it will take some time to forget.
You try and forget about it and go on with things, but it always knocks your confidence back for a while when you get on the track.
Part of the parcel. I mean, accidents happen. It's just like car racing. It's, you know, it happens. It's part of the territory.
Earlier last night in the individual pursuit, Lucy Tyler Sharman's drubbing of Kathy Watt continued. The superstar claiming Watt is no longer a threat.
My arch rivals are Klinier and Beluti, you know, the world champion, Olympic champion, because the three of us, like, we're all within hundreds of each other, and it's a great battle, but the other riders, like, quite off the mark.
The Olympic medalist has smashed Watt's Australian record by nearly 5 seconds. Now she's aiming to go even faster.
This year we've been doing a lot of ergometer work, which is basic strength work. Doesn't make you very sharp. So I'm quite surprised I rode as fast as I did this morning. But once we go to Bootkin, we're doing real track work and chasing the big boys, and it's intense. I anticipate I'll go quite a bit faster.
Also last night, sprint king Darren Hill powered his way to his 4th Australian title, easily defeating New South Welshman Sean Eadie. The West Australian won the best-of-3 final 2-0, rating it as one of his best.
I'm really wrapped, you know. You can see me going across the finish line there, that win was just as good as beating Gary Newan when he was world champion in '94.
To horse racing, and the best trotters in the land are heading to Tasmania for the Rich Easter Cup at Mowbray. The field will be boosted with the addition of 3 premier mainland horses. It was a proud launch this afternoon of the Examiner Easter Cup, and the Launceston Pacing Club had every reason to be boasting. The Cup will feature Australasian Grand Circuit performers, No Equal and Desperate Comment, plus Australia's premier trotter, Wagon Apollo, seen here finishing second behind New Zealand mare Pride of Petite in last week's Inter-Dominion final in Adelaide.
Very excited, particularly with the entry of Wagon Apollo. I think seeing the greatest trotter in Australia at the moment, it's going to be very thrilling, yes.
In Ulverston this afternoon, the CBA Premiers Bogues Originals officially announced their name change to the Bogues Brewers and revealed their new strip. Based on the outfit of the Seattle Supersonics, the Brewers hope to be just as strong as last season.
I think it's looking pretty good, too. We've lost a few players, but we've picked up a few, so from what we can tell right now, we'll be competitive. So.
And in Launceston, a silent sprint car won't be that way tomorrow and Saturday nights, when Tasmania takes on the USA at the Coca-Cola Carrick Speedway. The American team, made up of Fran Hogue, Kramer Williamson and Greg Cloverdale, are among the strongest to visit Australia. In the lead up to the 2000 Olympic Games, the Tasmanian Olympic Council heads into the most exciting period in its history with a female president leading the organisation for the first time. Former Olympic and Commonwealth Games representative Julie Kent was elected as the council's new president last night.
Back at work today after her uncontested elevation to president of the Tasmanian Olympic Council, Julie Kent was already busy planning to help Tasmanian athletes get to the Sydney Olympics.
It is, and I guess with Sydney coming along too in the year 2000 and being based in Australia, the Games being here, it is going to be very, very challenging. We've got a target of $200,000 that we need to raise as Tasmania's contribution to the Australian Olympic Council, so it's going to be a hectic time and a lot of work to be done.
Tasmania sent 12 athletes to Atlanta. It's hoped Sydney will see a much bigger local presence, but Kent sees the job as being more than just raising money. 2000
isn't just what it's all about. It's an ongoing thing with the Olympics, and it's important to get the Olympic ideals out in the community, schooling, education, those sort of processes. So it's going to be a long-term goal, not just Sydney 2000.
Julie Kent takes over the role from Neil Harwood, who is heading to Sydney to work with the Australian table tennis team. She represented Australia in diving at the 1982 and 86 Commonwealth Games, and also wore the Australian colours at the Los Angeles and Seoul Olympics.
And just briefly, another minefield looms for Australia's cricketers in the final test against South Africa tomorrow. Despite a rain-affected pitch, no changes are likely to the Test 11, though Paul Rifle still holds hopes of a call-up. And Lisa, that's all in sport for tonight.
Thank you, Steve. After the break, Peter Murphy will have all the weather news for us.
Gary McDonald's home on Southern Cross with a great new show.
3 contestants try to outwit 3 celebrities, and I'm there to make sure it gets out of hand.
Gary McDonald's Ripsnovers premieres 8 o'clock Friday.
You don't think I'm overdressed, do you?
Osteoporosis is a crippling disease caused by low calcium, so bones become brittle and break easier. There's one drink that's the best natural source of calcium, which makes it a vital part of a healthy lifestyle. So, how do you tell a milk drinker?
While you're running cattle, parasites are just waiting, ready to eat into your profits. But one brand has always protected them against the broadest range of parasites. Treated now, your stock can get on with producing more beef for you and your property. Ivermectin. Never compromise.
I have been instructed by the directors to reduce stocks. This means there are massive savings on our entire range of beds and bedding now. So if you want the best bedding deal, see us first at the bedroom. Don't miss out. It's only on for 3 days and ends this Sunday.
It's Tasmania's biggest sale of the year. For 4 days only, Ford dealers must liquidate all stock. New cars, demos, used cars, all drastically reduced. All to clear by Sunday. With special low-interest finance. New model Prestigas for just $13,888 drive away. New Falcons with $3,000 worth of free extras. Demos, company vehicles and hundreds of used cars must clear by Sunday. Your Ford dealer won't be undersold. This is Tasmania's biggest new and used car sale of the year. Special finance deals and genuine discounts. For 4 days only at your Ford dealer. Don't miss it.
Tonight's weather is brought to you by Country Club Casino, the only place with more games to play, more reasons to stay.
Good evening. Not a bad day in the north, and fine skies over the Mersey today as another Goliath vessel heads on in, with more isolated showers today mainly in the west and south. Today's top 24 at Bicheno and Eddystone Point, where clear weather prevailed. Last night we headed below average, with 1 at Lyawini the lowest, 5 millimetres of rain at Queenstown, today's heaviest fall. The satellite shows cloud mostly to the south of Tasmania, of course linked to that complex low-pressure system. Tropical cyclone Justin is still about, but is now regarded as being disorganised. And the close-up there shows some cloud over the west and far south today. More southerly winds tomorrow, up to around 15 to 25 knots, decreasing later tomorrow, with tomorrow's chart showing a high-pressure system extending a ridge over Tasmania. We'll bring these conditions. First up, some showers this evening, but a fine day tomorrow for Burnie and Devonport, 10 through